Now, let's talk about one of the big issues that is haunting the Labour Party, although they don't seem to care. They're intransigent on this one. That is, of course, the inheritance tax raid on farmers in the United Kingdom. Lots of misinformation out there. Should we try and get to the truth? Let's speak to Neil Parish, who's a former Conservative MP, but most importantly, a British farmer and former chair of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee, a man who knows a thing or two about agriculture in the United Kingdom. Neil, great to have you on the programme. Now,
good morning.
The latest headline on this is Labour's inheritance tax raid on farmers will spell the death of farm shops. Now, that might not sound like a big thing to most people, but this is all about farms having to strip back, sell assets, get rid of things. I, for one, blimmin' love a farm shop. I don't go into supermarkets. I can't remember the last time I went to a supermarket other than to buy some dishwasher tablets. I am a big user of proper farm shops and only ever buy British. And yet again, it's it's another example of what is going on here. Now, the Labour Party say, well, it doesn't really affect any farms. Oh, no, no, no. This is just rich landowners who are using agricultural property in order to invade inheritance tax. Not many farmers are going to be affected, which is why I say, well, why bother doing it then? Just get rid of it if it's not going to earn you any money. The National Farmers Union saying something quite different, saying could be 80% of farmers. We're having reports of farmers feel pressured now into a suicide window because there's this whole trying to scheme when you've got to die in order to make sense of all of this. And then, of course, Deaf for themselves are saying, well, we think about 37% of farms will not be affected, which spells out essentially that 2/3 of farms will be. You're a farmer. You've been the chair of the Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. How bad is this?
Yeah, it's very bad because it's attacking farmers because, you see, they work hard, they've got quite a lot of capital involved in their business, but the return on capital is very small. And so you've got, one of the last inquiries I was doing as a select committee chair was actually on the mental state of farmers. And of course, a lot of them are isolated as well. And it really is just an added problem. And I think one that the government should really step back from, but they don't seem to be taking any notice. I'm really glad also that you are a great believer in farm shops. I mean, it was only, 3-4 years ago when we had COVID, if you remember, everybody was delighted not with only going to the farm shop. I've got a friend who was also doing a huge delivery round as well during COVID. So, it's a really useful to the community as well as to the farmers. And I think they just don't understand the fact that farming is, like I said, a lonely life. It's also full of a lot of financial problems. And I think, this is just an added one. And of course, the one thing, I'm a third generation farmer. I'm hoping, my son will take on to a fourth. And you see, I think it's an interesting thing. Not everybody in society, has this privilege for this generational thing. But of course, it's also pressure, because if you're the generation that finally can't make ends meet and have to give it up, then you feel you've let not only yourself down, but your family and your previous generation.
And it's not exactly the sort of industry where, anyone just goes, oh, I want to be a farmer. Great, I'm just going to walk in there, get a combine harvester, get me some land and go out and work the fields. It is generational for a reason, because people are brought up in this environment. They are brought up with the knowledge. They're brought up with the ethos, the lifestyle, the work ethic, the connection to nature, to husbandry. It's almost sort of a romantic thing. We have such great pastoral farming in the UK, which requires a lot of land. If we want to go down the route of our European neighbours and have these intensive indoor farms, well, brilliant, but that's not the sort of muck I want to eat. That's not the way we raise animals in this country. I don't think. I think we've got a wonderful tradition of hill farming, of, going down the motorway and seeing sheep in the field. You only realise how unique this is when you go through other countries and you might see crops and sunflowers and all these other things, but you don't see loads of animals in fields when you drive across Europe. And I think that this is important defending. But do you think the problem as well here, Neil, is this? When I went to the farmers' protest, my goodness, my heart exploded with joy. I was really worried for the farmers. I backed them to the hilt, but there was something absolutely amazing about hearing every single regional accent on Whitehall, about seeing a sea of Barber jackets, torn ones with the big poacher's pockets, covered in mud splatters, not the ones worn by, you know, people in Islington to go to Glastonbury. Proper mucky boots, big strapping men with ruddy faces. It was all of Britain. It was the countryside. It was the backbone and the heart of this nation had all come to Westminster. I'd never seen anything like it. Once upon a time, this would be a regular thing where people from the towns and the villages outside would congregate in the centre of commerce in London. Well, that's not what London is anymore. London isn't even British anymore, quite frankly. And this is the point. This government doesn't like Britain, doesn't like farmers. They don't care. They don't understand rural communities. They've got nothing to do with them. They know those communities won't vote for them. All they care about is their globalist agendas. All they care about is whether or not we're being kind to migrants. Well, what about our farmers? What about the people who basically feed this country? It is an ideological thing as well, isn't it?
It is, and I think they do, as you said at the beginning, they see us all as sort of wealthy landowners, but we're not, you see. I mean, I was milking cows at 13, I left school at 16, I couldn't wait to go farming, and then later on I went into politics, but I've always been a farmer, and it's in your blood, looking after animals, looking after the countryside, making sure, you know, your grass-fed beef and lamb and milk is all out there for people to buy. And I think, you know, it's such a shame, and you're right, you know, I always say we're yeoman farmers, and we are the backbone, not only, you see, of food production, but in the villages, the parish councils and the communities, the village halls and all those types of things, they rely on farmers. If the roads snow up, who is it that goes out and clears the road? It's the farmers, very often not paid for it, actually, because they've got the big tractors, they can clear them. And so all of this is part of the community, and I think, you know, I don't know that actually this government is wider than farmers. I just don't think they like private business very much. And, you know, I mean, coupled in not only with the inheritance tax but the employment tax on national insurance, you can't take £25 billion from the private sector and expect not to have any effect. And I think, you know, I mean, they aren't, I mean, the one thing they're not going to get, are they, out of this budget is growth. And I mean, certainly in the farming sector and the farm shop, and then you've got, you know, also tourism sector, which is also linked a lot to farmers and farm cottages, all of these things. And I just don't think they understand us. And I wish that they would sort of row back from this, because I think it's spiteful and it's not really going to raise the government a lot of money, but it's going to cause individuals a lot of grief. And also, you know, you'll spend a lot of money on accountants and lawyers who I affectionately call parasites anyway, and they, you know, they're all got to be paid, and in the end, you know, you probably land up paying tax as well. And you can imagine a farmer, you know, 60, 70, perhaps 80, who's sort of the one thing they want to do is pass on to their children and grandchildren, and they're worried they can't. You know, it will affect their mental state. I'm not going to say they're all going to commit suicide, but, you know, it is there. It's an added pressure, and I think the government, you know, should be much more humane in this than they are.
I couldn't agree more. It's been fantastic talking to you, Neil Parish. Very quickly, before we go to break, what is their agenda here? Because there are a lot of people out there going, oh, isn't it funny that, you know, all of a sudden the farmers have got to sell their fields, and then Starmer's there going like, yo, with BlackRock, which is kind of a weird PR thing to do, to be like, hey, private sector, massive investment. There's all the conspiracy theories about, oh, this is like, you know, selling off the farmland to BlackRock, and then they're going to use it to stick solar farm. I mean, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. But what I don't understand is this. They're not backing away from this. They're not, you know, if oh, it's only a few farms. They know it's not. They know it's not only a few farms, surely, because the DEFRA statistics say otherwise. They're not backing away from this. They're sticking to it. Is it part of an agenda, or is this just incompetence and intransigence?
I would say post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after it, therefore because of it. This is nothing to do with BlackRock. That's a conspiracy theory, and yes, there might be an element of influence because of a kind of more global outlook, but the reality is they're doing this because they don't like people. It is an ideological government. That is what we're saying. We're trying to rationalise an ideology that is built on envy. It's built on spite. I thought that was a key word that Neil used there, and I thought it was such an important word. This is done because they just don't like certain things, and what we're seeing is a lack of empathy. They don't care about the farmers, and more importantly, they don't want to care about the farmers. They don't care about all these pensioners freezing, and they don't want to care about it. That's what we're seeing. All these things is to do with a lack of I'm right, you're wrong. And it is arrogance, and it is mainly what we're seeing, a metropolitan outlook versus a provincial, more British, more traditional outlook.
Right.
That is the real divide, we're seeing in our politics
It's people
now.
thinking that the world is frickin' London, and it's not.
Yes.
It's not. Get out outside the M25.
Yeah.
Get out and meet people. Understand what Britain is. That's what gets my
the closure of things like the farm shops will have a huge communal impact, you know, in terms of our building of communities and actually holding places together. One reason I think a lot of places don't really feel like anybody really cares and they feel a bit run down and damp is because nobody has any investment in that area, because people rent, or, you know, they're more likely to move around quite a lot. But things like farms and farm shops and little stores like that hold a community together in a way that we take for granted. This green and pleasant land doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
People actually work towards it, and I think a lot of people don't understand how much goes into countryside living and how much work is actually involved, because it's seen as quite a twee outlook, and, you know, it's all very...
people who live in cities think that 99% of the country is city and there's the odd farm here and there. Quite the reverse.
Yeah, they all think that people are wandering around in gilets on countryside. It's not, and I think that's why a lot of people in kind of a more metropolitan outlook didn't like Clarkson's farm and things like that, because it showed the reality of it, the hard work.
What's interesting is I think Clarkson himself had a Damascene conversion, because I'm pretty sure he did sort of go and buy a farm to, you know, save himself some cash money, and, you know, near the Chipping Norton set and all the rest. Then he came up with the idea of doing a production for Amazon Prime. Won't that be jolly? Won't that be fun? And it was brilliant. And what happened? You could see him suddenly meeting Caleb, meeting Gerard, seeing going through that learning process himself, actually.
I think the best one was when he met Caleb, and Caleb hated London. And he hated leaving the area to which he got. And that was a concept that Jeremy Clarkson, and I bet many people out there, had never seen before. You know, and it's that kind of idea that it's not that they don't care about the outside world, it's that they're so in love with what they do.
I know.
And like Neil said, it's in the blood. The countryside is in people's blood.
It is.
And the Labour Party and people like Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and stuff, they see it as numbers on a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
And that's the reality.
Right.